First thing, I'm worried about talking too much. I had a large cup of coffee, so I'm pretty hyped up this morning. The second thing, I have paid $5 to a lady to stand up and tell the banker to shut up and sit down. So I imagine there are several people that would like to tell their banker that, so she has that opportunity. So we're going to try to stay on target. The first thing I would like to do, my name is Ritter. I want to thank you for this opportunity, especially the Land Connection for being here. The second thing, I'd like to thank each one of you for the opportunity to spend the morning with you. The one thing I'm going to start out with is we have enough bad news. We need to talk about good news and opportunities, and that's what I'm going to try to focus on today. I try to be a Christian, and I listen to a lot of Christian radio. And Mercy Me has a song called about the younger me. And I want to talk about my younger me when I was in 1977. Some of you in this room weren't born then. But back in 77, imagine me having a lot more hair on my head. I have more hair, but in the wrong places like nose and ears. But on my head, I weighed a lot less than I do now. I've got a lot more wrinkles today than I did back then. I probably had more money in my pocket and less debt. But one of the things that stood out in 1977 as an employee at Farm Credit in Taylorville, Illinois, was a movie that Farm Credit put out called Farming in the Year 2000. Okay, to a lot of you, that seems really ancient. But this movie predicted the future of agriculture and the direction we were going to head. The first thing is, how many of you came today in all-terrain vehicles with 6 tires? Okay, I don't think anybody's putting their hands up, but that's what they were predicting. You wouldn't have farm pickups, you would have all-terrain vehicles to go out to your field. The second thing is, the proper attire for farmers would be jumpsuits and helmets, business helmets or factory helmets. Okay, I don't know that that's quite happened yet. The third thing was we would be looking at a cashless society. Okay, are we there? Yeah, I would say pretty much. A lot of people can do transfers on the computer. The next thing that they were looking at that time, poultry was one of the fastest growing things as protein sources, and they were looking to develop 3-foot chickens. Okay, I'm not sure we've reached that point yet, so that might be an area they kind of missed the boat on. I'm not sure. We didn't get into that. I was just kind of saying, wow, that's kind of out there. The next thing, livestock confinement would be the wave of the future. You would have security cameras in each of your pens with somebody sitting in an office checking all the animals and all the situation, like a factory. And then they talked about technology. You would have a computer each field that you could shoot up a satellite probe, and basically that would tell you the weather that day and for the next week. The seed, I remember just faintly, it looked like it was planted in a marshmallow. You would have the fertilizer, chemical, insecticide all the way around it. So that was some of the things from production. But what stood out about that day was a little blurb in this movie about a Comundi, Illinois farmer. And what he had done is build a wood hog finishing floor over a pond. And what would happen is the byproducts or waste of the pigs would fall into the pond, the fish would eat it, and then they would process the fish, and the fish byproducts would go back on the field, and then the products from the fields would go back and feed the hogs. To me, in 1977, that became the circle of life. And it's amazing how things come full circle in our lives. And I want to talk about timing. Jack Ersman is sitting back here. He's done a lot of great and wonderful things like a lot of the people in this room, but the timing wasn't right. The timing is right today for a lot of these things to be implemented, and they're popular, and the need is here. The need was back there, but people didn't realize it. So we're going to talk about how organic farming is becoming the new norm in today's society. I'm not sure that we'll see the norm of being 3-foot chickens, but a lot of the things that you're doing, we'll see a lot of opportunities. So we're going to talk about good news and opportunities. So if you'll turn in your brochure to the first item that says the new norms in agriculture. These are trends that I see coming in agriculture. Okay, my talk this morning and $1.50 might get you a cup of coffee at Casey, so this is just one person's opinion. The first item I've got up here is EPA. I think, in my opinion, the EPA is going to be one of the biggest factors in agriculture that determines the direction we're going to go. And how's that going to be? Water quality. We've all heard about Chesapeake Bay. We've all heard about Des Moines. We're all hearing about local rivers and streams and the concerns over water quality. What does that mean? That means cover crops are going to be something that's either going to be mandatory or voluntary. That's coming. We're going to see possibly less fall tillage. That's coming. That's going to change your practices. Possibly less chemicals and less fertilizer. I was just reading an article from an ISU professor that Buck got to write in our newsletter, and the comment he made is in France, they've cut back their fertilizer use 50% over the last 10 years because of water quality. So it is happening in other countries. So what does that mean to an organic producer? You're on the right track. You're ahead of the curve. Number two, we're going to talk about farm programs. So what's going to be in some of these farm programs that we're going to be looking at in the future? Cover crops. That is a big deal. And I've seen many states talk about crop diversification. That's going to be really important. And when we talk about crop diversification, we're talking more than corn and soybeans. We're talking wheat, oats, hay, grazing. All those are going to be very important to getting our soils back to where we need them. And those are going to be included. The next thing that I'm thinking about, and I looked right at Dave Bishop, is utilizing livestock. He's been preaching this for some time. And I was amazed in the Farm Bureau paper 2 weeks ago, they had an article about the value of hog manure. And basically they were projecting with a 2,500 head finishing unit, it would amount to be, I think it was 10.6 or 10.8 a year in income savings from fertilizer savings to that operation, plus all the organic matter in the manure. We've had people coming into our banks wanting to put up either cattle buildings or swine facilities, and the manure value is going to make the difference. And there are programs like the EQIP programs that will help match some of the funding, and we're seeing those become very popular. So in terms of farm programs, what you're doing is on target with the big picture in terms of where the government is headed. Farm crisis. The one thing that I see happening, one of the big things that is accelerating some of the things in organics beside the legwork that's been started is we're having a really hard time cash flowing on conventional farms. To be honest with you, this is a vacation for me to get away from conventional cash flows that are not working right now to come to a meeting like today. This is a breath of fresh air. Organics are cash flowing. So what's happening in the industry right now? We're seeing a lot of older farmers over the last few years go ahead and decide to retire. We're also seeing a new situation occurring in agriculture that bothers me. We have a lot of people my age in their 60s. Their landlords are starting to pass away. And guess what? The heirs have decided to go ahead and sell a farm. They're not keeping the farms. So maybe you had a landlord with 500 or 1,000 acres. That sounds really good. But when they pass away and you're worried about replacing that in your operation, that is a big problem. And we're seeing that occur in a lot of situations today. The other situation I'm running into is a lot of younger farmers in 2012 went out and bought a lot of equipment. They quit off-farm jobs. Their family living went up. Income tax went up. And now they're having to pay for it with less income. And it's creating some major cash flow issues. And we're going to see some fallout of a lot of farmers, young farmers out here, if they don't make adjustments. A lot of you in this room that are my age have been through this numerous times, but a lot of the young people haven't been through that, and we also have a lot of young lenders that have not been through that. So that's going to make a difference. Okay, so much for negative. I talked about positive. I was at a meeting with Dr. David Cole, he's kind of the godfather of ag economics, and I've listened to him over 30 years. And he brought up two things last week that I think are really good information that you need to take home and use. 60% of today's farms will turn over by 2030. 60% of the owners of farmland will turn over by 2030. Opportunity, folks. 20% of the family farms have nobody, there's no next generation to take over farms. So if you're a young organic farmer looking for land, there's going to be opportunities with new tenants or new landlords, and opportunities with existing farmers who are going to retire, plus some farmers defaulting or retire. There's going to be land available. So it would be a good opportunity to put out either custom work or get involved with other people in your neighborhood. There will be opportunities to grow. The next item is new niche markets in agriculture. This can be viewed as either a positive or a negative situation. What we're talking about is raising specific seed for specific markets, specific seeds, specific traits for specific markets. And that can be good and bad. If you're raising this and they don't take it, or they have financial problems, you're kind of hanging out with something that's not worth what you thought. But what they're doing is they're limiting the number of producers raising it. I see a lot of people in the last 2 years starting to raise non-GMO and taking it to their local elevator. what happens as times get tough, more people raise non-GMO, and the premiums start going down. So these niche markets like that are important if you can get involved, and they're good, stable companies, and you get the details worked out. The bad thing as a lender that I worry about is a lot of big companies are wanting to develop a relationship with you guys as producers. That's okay, but also some of them have talked about ownership, and I get really worried when they start coming out and wanting to buy farms and put you on them and have you work as a tenant. That's not what it's about. We need to keep the ownership and the management and all that with the farmers. So be careful on that, but that is also an opportunity for new things. Number 5 is really important, growing demand in markets for organic crops. We're looking at 10 to 14% annual growth in organics, and that's been that way. I don't care what year you look at, and they're projecting all the way through 18. We are importing, we don't have enough product supply to cover the demand that we have. We're presently importing a lot of grain into this country. How much grain, you would ask? We're importing 14 million bushel of soybeans. 14 million of soybeans. So how does that relate to what we produce? That's 440% of what we raise. Is there opportunity for growth in soybeans? I think so. Corn, we're importing 23 million bushels of corn, which is 126% of what we produce. There's a lot of opportunity. A lot of that is in the feed, and there's been a lot of concern with the quality standards from foreign countries. If we can raise enough, then we don't have that issue. And I challenge you to continue to grow and develop those things. Another fact that I've seen several times as I've done research for these things, 73% of today's consumers buy organic products occasionally. I was amazed about a year ago. I was at my daughter-in-law's house, who is in Farm Bureau in Indiana and has a very prestigious job. And I went in the pantry and there was organic chips, and it just floored me. Because I know sometimes my family worries about, what I'm saying and what I'm doing, and I'm following this bad path. But that's okay. There's a lot of people in history that, whether it's Jesus or Abraham Lincoln or a lot of the people that have had that same thought. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of opportunities, and you got to stand out. Today's consumers are looking at different buying patterns than we're used to. When I was, as a person in the 60s, when I went to buy stuff, it was always on taste, price, and convenience. Now what you've got is today's buyers are looking at relationships. They're looking at safe food, healthy food, and wellness considerations. So they're willing to pay premiums, but what they're looking at, there are certain things that they want. And if you can provide those niches, there's an opportunity to make money and do something that you like that they want, and that is a big deal. Okay, another thing that excites me as a banker is high net returns. Is anybody excited about making money? We don't see enough of that. Okay, as we looked at the numbers, high net returns in organic farming. So I went back and did some research, and one of the things that I saw in organic farming, we started out about 50% of the yields of conventional. And based on a lot of the studies that I'm looking at, we're closer to 60 to 70%. So yields are going up. Some of it's practices, some of it's seed, some of it is some of the byproducts that we're using, and some of it is just experience. Number 2, we look at our organic prices stable. And if you look over the past 10 years, organic prices have run almost 200% of conventional prices. Bottom line, as my wife says, what does that amount to? When you look at an average, you're looking about $200 an acre on corn, soybeans, wheat, and hay, all the way across the board. More net return per acre. What does that mean? Right now, if you're not cash flowing, that $200 takes care of family living, income tax, and term payments. And that's the difference right now in conventional farmers. They don't have enough to pay those. That is a big deal. Another big factor on net returns is we're starting to divide the organics into both feed and food division. And there's a world of difference between those two. A lot of people have went the feed route because that's easiest and it's a lower price, but if you can get into the feed division, then there's a lot more dollars being left on the table. Next thing got my attention as I looked at it as a banker was crop insurance guarantees. And if the people in this room, if you're raising organic crops, make sure and take advantage of crop insurance and selling your crops prior to July 15th. For example, this past year, I had guys raising soybeans. They got soybeans contracted at $24 a bushel. If you didn't have them sold, then your guarantee would be around $16 a bushel. That is a big difference. And on corn, There's some people in this room that had $14 corn sold last year, and the federal price was probably around $8 a bushel. So what does that mean? Bottom line, your lender has less risk. They like that right now, trust me. The second thing they like is you've raised your safety net and your profitability. Okay, you like that. The banker likes that. So that is a big deal. Make sure that you know the crop insurance and you utilize that. July 15th, get your contracts. Probably one of the most important things that I'm going to talk about is improved soils, improved health, soil health, and improved productivity. This is the wild card in all this. For years, we've mined corn and soybeans every year, and what's happened is we've taken all the goodie out of our soils. And it's amazing, and the conversations and a lot of the ag stuff that you're hearing is, we got to fix the soils. And that's what we're talking about. I read a soil and water conservation brochure recently, and it came up with 4 general principles. And those principles, I think, really kind of, if you wanted to take 4 lines and say this is organic farming, I think you'll hear that in these things. Keep soil covered as much as possible. Disturb the soil as little as possible. Keep plants growing throughout the year to feed the soil. And diversify as much as possible with crop rotations. Hey, people, that's organic farming. That's what you've been doing for years. Okay, that's a big deal. Okay, to laymen like myself, if you want to say dumbing or organics for dummies, okay, let me put it in my perspective. That means more earthworms, more organic matter, balancing the soils, which means better weed control. That means more productive using the nutrients in the soil. That means increased water holding capabilities. Is that a big deal? Over the last few years, we've spent a ton of money trying to get rid of the water. What I'm worried about if we have a drought of keeping the water in the soils and keeping those crops growing and less risk. Gabe Brown made the comment, 1 inch of organic matter is equivalent to 27,000 gallons of water holding. Okay, that's something that we need to know, and we need to be living that. Next item, number 9, restores family farms and opportunities. Okay, it's not, my time's not up. Okay, that's good. Restores family farms and opportunities. One of the things that we see happening, a lot of people want their children to come back to the farm. Okay, if you're a conventional farmer, you're worried about your own survival. You're not worried about your kids. And organic farming provides a new opportunity. What we're seeing is value-added products and services, whether it's crops, livestock, poultry, vegetables, range-free, antibiotic-free, hormone-free, natural. There are a lot of niches that you can bring your children back in. I look at Dave Bishop. Okay, you've got vegetables, you've got livestock, and you've got crops. That's typical, and when you bring your kids back, and each one might have a different enterprise. That's what we're seeing happen. Harold Wilkins has got a mill. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do to add value and be able to incorporate family. When I grew up back in the 50s and 60s, the big thing was keeping the kids on the farm, and we're getting back to that. So there's some good things starting to come back based on history. Number 10, you're going to question and say, Rich, why is this in there? I was at a meeting a week ago, and it says ethanol is now a mature market. Is that going to have an impact on agriculture? What is a mature market? That means that better days are behind it. Okay, so why is that occurring? We're less dependent on foreign oil than we used to be. We have surpluses of ethanol and feed byproducts right now. If you turn the news on, you're hearing that on a lot of egg shows. Okay, for ethanol to be successful, it needs subsidies, which I see going to be harder and harder to get. And the last thing is you need high gas prices. And we haven't talked about this. What's one of the resources that we're worried about in this country? Water. It takes a lot of water to make ethanol. So what I'm saying is if you're a conventional farmer, the ethanol has been a great thing, but what I worry about is the importance of ethanol to ag might be less in the future than it is now. Is that going to affect organic farmers? Not as much as conventional farmers. Organic education and acceptance. How many of you would have bet that a banker would have been here 5 years ago being the first warm-up act for today's program? Okay, I wouldn't have said that. And if you would have told me when I was in 77, that younger me, that I would be speaking at organic conferences, that's probably more far-fetched than the Cubs winning the World Series. But some other things, to talk about is in terms of organic education and acceptance. I have had okay, I got 5 minutes, okay. Organic investors seeking organic tenants. I've had landlords looking for tenants, conventional farmers, state and federal new programs for loans. Bankers are getting involved, publications. If you look at the marketing, Everything is saying non-GMO and different things like that. The last thing I want to hit is more younger and smaller farmers, and this may be the highlight. Illinois organic farms, one thing that I thought was interesting, 44% of the land in organic is owned, 56% rented. Okay, 69% of today's farmers are under 30 years of age. That is a biggie, folks. 59% of the farmers are under 10 years of farming. A lot of young farmers getting started. Do we see that in conventional ag? The average age is 50. Average farm size, 358 acres on conventional farmers in Illinois. Did you hear that? Not everybody is 3 to 10,000 acre farms. Organic farms is 154 acres. There are 74,300 farmers in Illinois. 49% of those farmers make more off the farm than they do on the farm. So there's more smaller farmers that are doing it. Okay, that sounds like organic market. So what I want to leave the message with you folks today is the fact that you're more the normal than the exception, and agriculture is coming to you, and you're going to have to change a lot less than they are. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to visit with you. I have a lot of information, and the other thing that I've done is whenever you have a question I don't have the answer, which I've had a lot of that with wife and kids. They'll ask me questions, and I don't have the answers. So I've learned you got to go find that information. Other people have the same questions. I want to thank everybody for coming. This is awesome to see this many people and smiling faces and positive cash flows. And there is opportunity and there is good news. Thanks, folks.